There was no right to ride on a plane, to enter a restaurant or a store.
You may be told you have to leave because people don't want to watch someone drool.
It is a civil right to be independent in America.
Today we live among over 50 million people with disabilities who lead self-affirming lives, who are not defined by their disability but by who they are. However, this was not always true. The past treatment of these individuals was horrific. The rights of people with disabilities and our responsibility as a society to implement those rights has clearly been a struggle throughout history. From the 1200s until the 1700s, it was an accepted belief that disabled people were possessed by the devil or evil spirits. When someone had a seizure, it was believed to occur because an invisible demon attacked a person's body. As a result, they were routinely whipped, tortured, and burned at the stake. In the 1800s, science began to replace religion as the main authority regarding life. Biology and science are used to explain the world. Instead of being seen as having a spiritual deficit, these individuals are now seen as having a genetic deficit. However, they are still seen as meager, tragic, pitiful individuals who were unable to contribute to societies except as entertainment in the circus. In the early 1900s, some progress began to emerge. The Braille system for the blind was introduced to America. The American Foundation for the Blind, that was recognized as Helen Keller's cause in the United States, was founded. Even though it seemed that the care of people with disabilities was improving, for the majority, it was not.
In 1917, a movie titled The Black Stork featured the real Dr. Harry Heisenberg was released. This doctor refused to operate to save the lives of disabled infants. He believed that they should just die. This controversy only fueled the public's fear of disabilities and the power of doctors to choose who should live or die. The genetic scare of the 1920s erupted with the portrayal of people with developmental disabilities in the movies. The public's fear increased. The public thought that these individuals could be driven by rage and were intent on hurting others. They were portrayed as villains, and this stereotype contributed to the society's fear of people with physical disabilities living in the community. In reaction to misguided fears about these individuals, the eugenics movement led to thousands of people with disabilities being forced into sterilization. Anyone who was thought to have a family history of disabilities were sterilized in order to keep them from reproducing. The Supreme Court decision of Buck v. Bell in 1927 ruled that forced sterilizations for people with disabilities was not a violation against their constitutional rights. It was stated that this was for the protection and health of the state. Although the Supreme Court has never officially overturned this ruling, the opinion as a whole is that this practice is universally condemned.
During the 1930s, the German law for the genetically diseased offspring passed. Doctors were required to register anyone known to have a genetic illness. Hitler ordered widespread mercy killings of the sick and disabled. The Nazi program, codenamed Action T4, was instituted to eliminate life unworthy of life. A committee decided on the basis of questionnaires filled out who would be killed. There were no consultations with doctors or parents of children who might have a disability. Children were killed with morphine injections, gassed with cyanide, or chemical warfare agents, starved to death, exposed to extreme cold so that their deaths would appear natural. At the Nuremberg trials in 1945, some Nazi defendants cited the Supreme Court decision of Buck versus Bell in their own defense.
Institutions became the main place where both adults and children with disabilities were put away for their own good and the good of society.
We have a situation that borders on a snake pit, and that the children live in filth, that many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because of lack of attention.
They were considered to be morally defective. The patients suffered severe emotional and physical abuse. In this picture, John Daggy, age of 4, was sent to live in an institution with his sister in Minnesota. During his first day, he witnessed his sister getting a surgery called a lobotomy. Dr. Walter Freeman claimed that lobotomies could cure disabilities such as schizophrenia and behaviors like we see in people with ADHD.
In a transorbital lobotomy, Freeman would first have the patient rendered unconscious through the use of the electroconvulsive shock machine.
Usually 3 successive in a sturdy young person, 4 or even 6 convulsions may be administered without danger.
The doctor would take an ice pick instrument while the patient was awake, stick it into the brain, and wiggle it up and down and sever the brain tissue. Former President John F. Kennedy had a sister named Rosemary who, due to behavior problems and mood swings, in the year 1941 she underwent a lobotomy in hopes to fix her. However, the surgery left her permanently incapacitated. Her mental capacity diminished to that of a 2-year-old. She was 23.
In the 1950s, there were still some laws on the books in some states prohibiting persons diseased, mutilated, or in any way deformed from appearing in public. However, the National Association of Retarded Citizens was formed, and they provided consultation and support for President Kennedy's mental retardation legislative program. The organization is now known as the ARC. President Kennedy had another sister, Eunice Kennedy Shriver, who wrote an article in Saturday Evening Post about their sister Rosemary and explained how their family adjusted. The article was read by millions and further convinced parents that having a child or sibling with mental retardation was nothing to feel shame or guilt over.
Mental retardation is a very serious problem in this country, Senator Ribicoff. It affects over 6 million people living in this country. It is a major health problem among children today.
Eunice Kennedy Shriver then went on to create the Special Olympics, which has been an avenue for over 4 million people with an intellectual disability to demonstrate their athletic ability and empower them to be leaders in our society and teach us all about acceptance and understanding.
It's my life, it's now or never. I ain't gonna live forever.
We do not like the use of the R word. It offends us. We want to replace it with another R word, respect. God created us for a purpose, to do our best, and to make the world a better place.
Well, I think she, transformed in a global way the way that all people view people with special needs, including the people with special needs themselves.
Many parents began fighting alongside their children for the closure of institutions and for better services in the community. Influenced by the civil and human rights, the parent movement empowered citizens with disabilities to have a more active role in the fighting for their rights. They demanded freedom, equality, and justice for all citizens. As Rosa Parks was fighting for the right to sit at the front of the bus, disability rights activists were fighting for the right just to get on the bus. After much protest, the Urban Mass Transit Act was passed, requiring all mass transit vehicles be equipped with wheelchair lifts.
In the 1975 Public Law 94-142, the Education for All Handicapped Children was passed. It was known as IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It established the right for a free and appropriate education for all students, required all public schools accepting federal funds to provide equal access to education for all students with disabilities. Senator Tom Harkin wrote legislation for the Americans with Disabilities Act. In our interview with him, he told us that the ADA prohibits discrimination based on disability. He said there is more work to be done. Nearly 2/3 of working-age adults with disabilities are not in the workforce. This is something we must change.
That you deserve to be respected, and that they will enrich your life beyond your wildest dreams. And when you have people with difference in your life, that's something to celebrate and get excited about, and know that you as a human being will be a better human being.
Stereotypical biases were not instantly transformed with the creation of these acts and laws. People with disabilities still face prejudice and biases with stereotypical portrayal of people with disabilities with physical barriers to school, housing, and jobs. It is our responsibility as a society to make these wrongs right.
People with disabilities throughout history have been defined as objects of shame, fear, pity, and ridicule, and have been thought to have been possessed by demons, genetically not worthy of life, sterilized, exterminated, incarcerated, placed in horrific state institutions and nursing homes, and objects of pity.
The ongoing struggle of people with disabilities to gain full citizenship is an important part of our history. It is society's responsibility to ensure that their rights are being served and that the injustices that they have faced throughout history are never repeated.